All right, I absolutely hate doing this, but y'all love it. Well, y'all love to hate it. The updated top 25. Let's get into it. Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And two, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I post pointless, barely watchable college football videos just like this one almost every single day of the year. We do call-in shows, live streams on the weekends. We have a really good time. We got a really good college community, college football community here. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. Now, I only do 3 top 25s during the offseason. I do one in February after what used to be signing day. Now it's late signing day. So I did that one a couple of months ago. I then updated after all the spring practices and the portal window now, which just closed last week. That's this top 25 ranking here. And then I do a final sort of preseason ranking 2 or 3 weeks before the season starts. Now, my top 25 rankings in the offseason change and evolve drastically almost every single week during the offseason, which is why I don't put them out every single week. They would just be so different from week to week. You learn more about the teams as you go through the offseason, everything from looking at the team's schedules to watching the spring practices or reading up about the spring practices, quarterback competitions that have maybe been figured out. You've got, of course, a portal window, which has caused some significant changes to my top 25 this go around. Tennessee, as an example, I had to drop down because they lost Nico. We'll talk more about that when we get to them. Sorry. And just sort of the everyday news that comes along with the offseason and learning more and more about the teams and the rosters and everything like that. It's sort of your opinion on teams tends to evolve over the course of the offseason. So by no means do I think that this is some sort of, like this is the most accurate top 25 on the planet. This is just a snapshot in time of how I'm feeling about these teams for the 2025 season at the end of April. This is going to change. If you ask me my opinion on some of these, maybe next week I'll have a different opinion. I won't actually put out another top 25 until the first or second week of August. But anyway, I'm going to kind of go through it, give you my thoughts on some of these teams here. I'm just now realizing I forgot to put the numbers 1 through 25 in the corners, but I think you get it. Texas is 1, TCU is 25. I think you get it. I decided Texas 1, Ohio State 2. There really is no rhyme or reason here. These two teams play in week 1. So it's really irrelevant where any poll has these two teams ranked right now. Every single ranking or poll or whatever you want to look at on planet Earth is going to have both Texas and Ohio State in the top 5. And then in week 2, whoever wins this game in week 1 is going to be ranked number 1 in the country in week 2. So it really doesn't matter. Now, does this mean I think Texas is going to beat Ohio State? Not necessarily. My rankings are not a prediction of what I think might happen in the future. So this is not a prediction of how I think the teams are going to be ranked at the end of the year or in week 5 or even in week 2. In fact, I've been asked a lot specifically about the Texas and Ohio State game. And while I don't start making my game-by-game prediction videos until the end of May and beginning of June, if you forced me to pick a winner right now in the Texas-Ohio State game, I'm probably going Ohio State. It's in Columbus. Both of these teams have a ton of returning talent, but brand new quarterbacks. Maybe Texas has a little bit of an edge at the quarterback position. I'm not even talking about talent. I'm just mean in terms of experience. Arch Manning has been in the system at Texas. This would be his 3rd year. He's started several games due to Quinn Ewers' injuries over the last couple of years. He's got a lot of playing time, even some playing time in big moments, SEC championship games, things like that, playoffs. But the games at Ohio State, it's early in the year. Offenses are usually a little bit slower to get going than defenses are. So I'm kind of just leaning the home team. If the game was at Texas, I'd probably be leaning Texas to win that one. I think these are two of the best teams in the country. Obviously, Ohio State is the defending national champions. They won it all last year. They looked completely dominant in the postseason, and they've got a lot of weapons returning on the outside on offense. Jeremiah Smith and that group of wide receivers. They do have to replace their quarterback, like I mentioned, and both starting running backs. And defense is really a question mark, I think, for Ohio State, too. They lose Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator. And I know Ohio State is extremely talented on the defensive side of the ball, but they lost some key playmakers over there. And let's not forget, the reason Ohio State won their first national title last year and not 3 years ago or 4 years ago under Ryan Day is because they weren't very good defensively pre-Jim Knowles. They had talent then too, maybe not quite the level of talent they have now, but I am curious to see what impact or effect it will have on Ohio State defensively to lose Jim Knowles. He, of course, has moved on to become defensive coordinator at Penn State. But I think these are two of the best teams in the country. I would not be surprised if one of these two teams is hoisting the national championship trophy at the end of the year. They both have great coaching staffs. It does kind of feel like Steve Sarkisian is sort of where Ryan Day was a couple of years ago. He's sort of won almost everything you can win except the national title. They've made the playoffs 2 years in a row. They didn't win the SEC last year, but they won the Big 12 the year before that under Steve Sarkisian. It's starting to feel like not a question of if Texas and Steve Sarkisian is going to win a national title, but when will they win a national title? It's kind of how it felt with Ryan Day the last couple of years leading up to them finally breaking through last season. So I hope Ohio State fans aren't insulted or anything that I've got them at number 2 here. I could flip a coin and easily swap Texas and Ohio State. There is no doubt in my mind, though, that these are my top 2 teams heading into the season, Texas and Ohio State, at least right now. Again, just a snapshot of how I feel right now, the end of April. I've got Clemson at 3, and I'm going to tell you, if you made me bet my last dollar on one team to make the playoffs this year, it would be Clemson. They return one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Cade Klubnik. The offensive coordinator, Garrett O'Reilly, is going into his third year. That's his name, right, Garrett? Garrett, or not O'Reilly. I think an auto part. Garrett Riley. Anyway, Garrett Riley going into his third year. They've made some changes on the defensive side of the ball, which should pay off. They still have a ton of talent over there. I still have some questions about Clemson at the wide receiver and the running back position. Now, they lose Maffa off of last year's team, who was sort of their bell cow back. Did a lot for them offensively. He's gone. They've moved a wide receiver from wide receiver to running back. He won't be RB1, I don't think, but he's in the rotation, which tells me they're not extremely confident in the depth in terms of the running back. And they've got some talented wide receivers, but it seems like it's been a few years since you really had to worry about any Clemson wide receivers. So can they find like that go-to wide receiver this year to help Klubnik out? We'll see. They're in the ACC, and the brutal reality of college football right now is there's just not a lot of hurdles to jump over in the ACC. So if I think Clemson is the best team in the ACC, that makes me pretty confident to get back to the hypothetical bet. If I had to put a dollar on any team in the country, like I guarantee this team makes the playoffs, it would be Clemson. Not necessarily because I think Clemson is the best team in the country, although I think they're one of the best teams, but they're in the ACC. They have one of the easier paths. Interesting first game for Clemson. They play LSU. Clemson has lost 3 straight games to the SEC. They lost to Georgia to open the season last year. They lost to South Carolina in the last game of the regular season, and they then lost to Texas in the playoffs. So a 3-game losing streak for Clemson against SEC teams. LSU, on the other hand, hasn't won a week 1 game since 2019, which honestly might be the most mind-boggling stat in all of college football right now. While LSU hasn't won the SEC or any national titles in the last few years, they're a consistently good team. Maybe they haven't been great year in and year out. They made the SEC championship game a few years ago in Brian Kelly's first year as head coach. They're losing to Georgia, but they've been a consistently good team. But for whatever reason, they have stumbled week 1, not winning a week 1 game since 2019. So one of those streaks is going to come to an end there in week 1 when Clemson plays LSU. You see, I've got LSU down there at, what is that, 8th. The game is at Clemson. So look, I'm going to be honest. It really doesn't matter whether you've got Clemson ahead of LSU or LSU ahead of Clemson in any type of preseason ranking or poll. They play week 1. The winner of that game is going to move up. The loser is going to move down. It's a similar situation to the Texas-Ohio State deal. So if there's any LSU fans watching and they're mad for some reason that I've got LSU at 8, it doesn't matter. Beat Clemson week 1 and you're going to be in everybody's top 5, including Uncle Lou's. The game is at Clemson. So again, just like with the Texas-Ohio State, maybe I'm leaning a little bit Clemson in that one right now. Although, like I said, I don't make official predictions until the end of May, beginning of June. But I think Clemson's going to be a really good team in 2025. I've got Penn State at 4. And to be honest with you, The only reason I don't have them higher, I think they might be the best team in the Big Ten. The problem is, you already know what the problem is. Until Penn State starts beating their toughest competition, once in a while at least, it's hard for me to have full faith in their ability to do it. Now, I am a James Franklin believer. I push back against people all the time who tell me James Franklin's not a good coach, doesn't know what he's doing, he's overrated. I don't think he's overrated at all. He's been the second or third best coach in the Big Ten for a decade. That's what he is. That's what Penn State has been, the second or third best team in the Big Ten for a decade. They were that again last year, in my opinion. I know they made the Big Ten championship game, but they weren't better than Ohio State, and they weren't better than Oregon. But who else in the Big Ten was better than Penn State? Nobody. I don't think Indiana was better than Penn State. Now, that's a debate, I guess. And they're loaded. Drew Aller comes back at quarterback. Both of their running backs chose to come back. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, maybe the best 1-2 punch in all of college football. They lose Abdul Carter on the defensive side of the ball, and he cannot be replaced. He's an absolute beast. But they're still going to have a really good defense. I already mentioned they bring Jim Knowles in as defensive coordinator, maybe the best defensive coordinator in all of college football right now. Their defense will be fine. It's the same age-old question. Can they win the big game, and can they find the playmakers on the outside? This is a case where the transfer portal matters. They bring in Trevor Pena, wide receiver from Syracuse, had almost 1,000 yards receiving last year. If he can get going at Penn State and Penn State can develop a legitimate threat on the outside, that's going to make those two running backs even better. They always have good lines of scrimmage. I am really high on Penn State in 2025, but they've got to beat some of the big boys in the Big Ten eventually. Notre Dame, I've got at 5. I think they have a good shot at getting in the playoffs again. Now, they've got a tougher schedule this year, it looks like right now heading into the season, than what they had last year. They play Texas A&M early on. They play Boise State early on. They play Arkansas early on. Arkansas, not a great team, but their schedule does look more difficult, especially the first half, than it did last year. We'll see if they can get their find their way back to the playoffs. Brand new quarterback up there, CJ Carr, I guess, is going to take over for Riley Leonard, who is, I guess, off to the NFL, although I don't really expect him to catch on in the NFL at all. Speaking of running backs with Penn State, Notre Dame's got a good one too with Jeremiah Love. They've got another running back too, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but they've got a great 1-2 running back combination. And Notre Dame, I think, has got some legitimate wide receivers. Now, I liked Riley Leonard. He was good at what he did. But what he didn't do was kind of distribute the ball. He wasn't a very good passer. That's just what it is. It doesn't mean he wasn't a good quarterback overall, but he wasn't a great passer. It's possible Notre Dame has a better passing game this year without Riley Leonard than they did last year with him. And yeah, Greathouse on the outside and a couple of other interesting wide receivers too. I think Notre Dame could have another good year in 2025. Oregon, I've got at 6. Look, Oregon can win it all. They recruit great. They portal great. They're one of the best in the NIL game. I think they've got a top 3, top 4 coaching staff in all of college football, and they're absolutely loaded on both sides of the ball. Like a lot of the top teams on this list, they've got a new quarterback, which is kind of an interesting theme heading into 2025. You just take a look at my ranking here, but you could apply this to almost any ranking. The number 1 team, Texas. The number 2 team, Ohio State. The number 5 team, Notre Dame. The number 6 team, Oregon. The number 7 team, Georgia. The number 9 team, Miami. What is that? 6 of the top 10 teams in the country have brand new quarterbacks heading into 2025. Oregon is no different. Dante Moore set to take over quarterback duties there. Has some experience from UCLA from a couple of years ago, but Oregon will be really, really good again. Georgia, I've got it 7. I'm kind of on the fence about Georgia. They're one of the most talented teams in the country. Like Oregon, they've got one of the best coaching staffs in the country. They won the SEC last year, made the playoffs before losing to Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. But, man, they are replacing a lot with a lot of unknowns. Yeah, Gunnar Stockton comes in at quarterback, 1 career start. That's that loss to Notre Dame. He did lead Georgia to a second-half comeback win against Texas in the SEC championship game last year, and I thought he played pretty well against Notre Dame, honestly. Threw for over 200 yards, completed over 60% of his passes with no interceptions. He did have the 1 key fumble, but he was blindsided. It really wasn't even his fault. Georgia's offense was not good in that game at all. So how much of that is on Gunnar? How much of it is on, Notre Dame just had a really good defense? How much of it is on the poor offensive line play from Georgia? I don't know. So Gunnar Stockton is a huge question mark at quarterback for Georgia. Maybe he ends up having a really good year. maybe he's not that good. There's just no way to know really about Gunnar Stockton. The offensive line at Georgia is going to have 4 new starters. Now, Georgia's offensive line last year didn't play great, but did you see the NFL draft? They almost all got drafted. So it wasn't a talent issue. It was sort of a cohesion and gameplay issue with Georgia along the offensive line, where they're going to have 4 new starters there this year. Now, they're all highly rated, all highly recruited. Most of them will eventually be drafted into the NFL, but how good will they be as a group? A question mark. Don't know. Not saying they're going to be bad, not saying they're going to be good, but it's a huge question mark. So offensive line, question mark. Quarterback, question mark. Wide receivers. Now, the wide receivers are a question mark in that you got a lot of new ones there, but there's no way Georgia's wide receivers can be as bad as last year. Georgia had 3 of the top 10 wide receivers in the country in terms of dropped passes. That's unbelievable. It's just mind-boggling. Georgia's wide receiver play last year was absolutely atrocious. Now, Georgia's not known as a team or a school that, spits out first-round NFL-type talent at the wide receiver position, but I've never seen it as bad as it was last year. They get Colby Young back from suspension after he was cleared in a legal case. They bring in a couple of transfers and Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, who's a big, tall, outside guy, which is something they really lacked last year. The Branch kid from Southern Cal, and they've got some returning players from last year's team that, if they can improve and learn how to catch the ball, could be okay. I like their tight ends. Running back, huge pickup in the portal, McCray out of Illinois. Not that he's some sort of All-American or Heisman candidate, but he is a perfect complement to what Georgia has with Nate Frazier. Nate Frazier, as a true freshman last year, ran for about 700 or 800 yards. So did McCray at Illinois. He ran for 600 or 700. No career fumbles for McCray. He's a big body, 6'2", 230, can pound between the tackles. And if he can do it in the Big Ten, he can do it in the SEC. Great 1-2 combination at running back there for Georgia. Defensive side of the ball, I'm not as worried about Georgia defensively just because of the track record. Yeah, they lost some talent to the NFL. They need some help at pass rush. They went and got the kid from Army. We'll see there. But I think Kirby has earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to defense. I've got Georgia just outside the top 5 there at number 7. LSU at 8, to me, is the wild card. I think Nussmeier might be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They've absolutely killed it in the portal. LSU has. Now, the question becomes, how many of those portal additions are going to be hits? How many are going to be misses? If the majority of their portal additions end up being hits, I think LSU has potential to compete to win the SEC. They're extremely talented, and I know Brian Kelly's a lightning rod and a lot of criticism of some of the things he's done, but Brian Kelly's been a Power 5, now Power 4 head coach for 15 years, and he averages over 10 wins a year. That's not easy to do. You can't make a list of top 10 coaches that doesn't have Brian Kelly in it. It just doesn't exist. So you can tell me he's overrated or he's not any good or he's not a cultural fit at LSU. Tell me all that stuff. I think LSU could be a dangerous team. I'm excited to watch that LSU Clemson game in week 1. Miami, I've got at 9. Carson Beck comes in to play quarterback. As long as his elbow heals up from that injury he had in the SEC title game, he's going to put up video game numbers for Miami, I think. He put up great numbers at Georgia in 2 years as the starter there, and he's not going to be playing the same level of defense week in and week out as the quarterback at Miami as he was as the quarterback at Georgia. I think they'll be fine there. All the questions about losing Cam Ward and bringing in Carson Beck and is Carson Beck going to be as good as Cam Ward? Blah, blah, blah. That conversation is a waste of time. Number 1, no, Carson Beck is not going to be as good as Cam Ward. Number 2, what does it matter? Miami's got to get better defensively. The offense is not the problem. Miami averaged, 50 points a game last year? Okay, maybe this year they only averaged 40. The defense has got to get better. Don't give up 45 points a game, right? If you score 40 a game, but don't give up 45, you'll be fine. So again, just like with Clemson, Miami's in the ACC. There's not a whole lot of hurdles to jump over in the ACC. There's just not. I mean, when you start talking about legitimate teams in the ACC that have a chance to win the ACC title and then get into the playoffs, you start with Clemson, but where do you go after that? Miami, Louisville, Georgia Tech, SMU again, maybe. I mean, there's just not a lot there. I think Miami's got a chance to have another good year. They had a good year last year. They lost that game at the end of the year to Syracuse and blew it. And that's on Miami and their defense. Whole new defensive staff, a lot of new additions and young guys through recruiting. Again, just like with Georgia's wide receiver group, I don't see any way possible Miami's defense is as bad this year as it was last year. I've got Kansas State at 10, and this is a tough one because I try real hard not to. there are some good teams in the Big 12, okay? I don't think there's a single team in the Big 12 that can win the Natty. I don't. I do think there's a team or two in the ACC that if things fall their way could make a run in the playoffs. I love watching the Big 12. There are legitimately good teams in the Big 12. I don't know that there's anybody in the Big 12 that can come close to winning a Natty. But somebody's going to win the Big 12, and somebody's going to get into the playoffs. Who's it going to be? Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, Arizona State, Texas Tech, TCU. I can't tell the difference really between a lot of these teams. You look at last year, Arizona State won the Big 12 and made the playoffs. They were picked dead last in the Big 12. So it's just a hard conference to figure out. And do I think that Kansas State is the 10th best team in the country? No. But this is not a power ranking. And without throwing my boy Juice Poot under the boat or under the bus, I don't do power rankings. My rankings are a combination of where I feel a team deserves to be ranked based on how good they are and where I feel they should be ranked based on other outside factors. And the reality is somebody from the Big 12 is making the college football playoff. I really like Avery Johnson, the quarterback at Kansas State. Now, I was very high on them last year, and they disappointed me a little. So maybe I was just a year early. That's kind of what I'm banking on here. But I will admit that out of all my top 10 teams, the team I'm least confident will even finish. I mean, it's possible Kansas State is unranked. That's how much of a crapshoot the Big 12 is, right? In other words, Kansas State versus Georgia Tech, for example, who do you think would win that game? And you see, I've got Georgia Tech all the way down there at whatever that is, 16. Kansas State versus Alabama. Who do you think would win? This is not a power ranking, okay? I would probably pick Alabama to beat Kansas State. This is not a power rating, okay? This is a ranking. And as much as it makes people mad, your record is a part of your ranking. It's not all that matters, but it matters to some degree. And Kansas State's got to play a bunch of Big 12 teams, and Alabama's got to play a bunch of SEC teams. So anyway, I got Kansas State at 10. Illinois at 11. Who's going to be this year's Indiana? Could be Illinois. They were good last year. They beat South Carolina in a bowl game, one of the best low-level bowl games we've seen in a long time. I am curious to see how much losing Josh McCray hurts them. He was a big part of their offense last year. In fact, if you watch that bowl game against South Carolina, he was the best player on the field. It looked like he won the offensive MVP in that game, I believe. So we'll see what they look like offensively without him, but they looked really good last year. Favorable schedule. We'll see. They could be this year's Indiana, sort of a sneaky team that ends up in the playoffs at the end of the year. South Carolina, I've got at 12. Same thing. I think South Carolina, I think people are underestimating South Carolina. Beamer's been there it's been there 4 years now, 3 to 4 years. South Carolina has exceeded the preseason win total expectation. They were 1 win away from the playoffs last year. Lenore Sellers returns at quarterback, one of the best in the SEC, one of the best in the country, really. I think Nicholas Harbor is set to have a huge year at tight end for South Carolina. And you say tight end, he's technically a tight end. They play him a lot like Georgia used to play Brock Bowers. I'm not comparing Nick Harbor to Brock Bowers in terms of overall skill level. I'm just saying they use him in a similar way. He can split out wide. He can line up tight. He can run a route like a wide receiver, big, tall, track speed. And he gave up track, which is important because he's been splitting time in the spring every year between track and football. He gave track up full-time football this spring. I expect him to have a breakout season. They got to replace some running backs. They got to do some work defensively to replace some pieces. But, people keep sleeping on Shane Beamer, and he keeps proving them wrong. Again, have they been an elite dominant team? No. But they went 9-3 last year. And in three of the last 4 years, they've exceeded their preseason win total. So just a team to keep an eye on. They remind me of last year's Ole Miss, last year's South Carolina, last year's Alabama, potential bubble team for the playoffs. I've got Michigan coming up after that. Now, quarterback is going to be a huge deal here. Michigan could be 9-3, potentially 10-2, competing for a playoff spot at the end of the year, or they could be 8-4. Or something. It's going to depend on the play of the quarterback. How quickly can Bryce Underwood develop? I do believe in him as a quarterback. I think he's ultra talented. How quickly will we see that? They play Oklahoma early in the year. Will Bryce Underwood be the starter in that game? We'll see. We've got Alabama right after that. because Michigan beat them. I mean, I know it was last year and it shouldn't matter, and I'm just not completely sold on Alabama. I got major question marks with Alabama about their quarterback and their running game. Now, I do like their wide receivers. I think they're going to have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the SEC. Ryan Williams is an absolute monster. They get Jeremy Bernard back at wide receiver. They bring Ryan Grubb in as offensive coordinator, who was with the board at Washington the year they made the playoffs. They've got some impressive pieces over there. But Ty Simpson, it looks like, is going to be the quarterback. Keelan Russell is a true freshman. I don't expect him to start this year unless things get sideways and maybe they put him in. I think it's going to be Ty Simpson. And then defensively, I think they'll be okay. I don't think they're going to be like, some of the sort of dominant Saban defenses we used to see, but I think they'll be okay over there. But again, they have a tough schedule. They got to play on the road at Georgia. They play Tennessee. They play Auburn at the end of the year. They play Oklahoma. They play LSU. So you have a tough schedule for Bama. They remind me a lot of last year's team. You're probably looking at a team that's going to win somewhere between 8 and 10 games. So they're either going to barely miss out on the playoffs or they're going to get in at 10-2. We'll see. Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech can win the Big 12 this year. They are loaded. They loaded up in the portal. Again, this is a team I was kind of high on a couple of years ago, and it didn't pan out. It kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I almost didn't rank them this high just for that reason, because I didn't want to be made to look like a fool again with Texas Tech. I think they have a chance to win the Big 12. I really do. Now, that's easy to say because there's like 6 teams I think have a chance to win the Big 12, but Texas Tech is one of them along with Kansas State. You see, I've got BYU and Iowa State on here too. Arizona State, who made the playoffs last year, and their quarterback is back, Sam Leavitt. But, Cam Scatterby was such a big part of what they did down there. So anyway, getting ahead of myself now, but I got Texas Tech at 15. Georgia Tech at 16. I think Georgia Tech is a sleeper to win the ACC. I'm just going to go ahead and say it again. In this new world of college football, the playoff structure that we have now, at least for this season, they're going to change it for next year. We'll see what ends up happening there. But like the idea to just look at Georgia Tech and go, well, they have this player and that player and that player, and their coach is this and that. And I don't think they're good enough to make the play. I don't think they're a playoff team. Can they win the ACC is all that matters. I don't know. I think Clemson is better right now. I think Miami is better right now. But Georgia Tech seems to own Miami. Haynes, I think Georgia Tech is a team to keep an eye on. I wouldn't bet $1 on Georgia Tech making the playoffs. And look, as a Georgia fan, I'm sworn to hate Georgia Tech. But they're a sneaky good team. Those kids there absolutely love Brent Key, and I do think he's a good coach. And I just think they're a team to keep an eye on. I do think Georgia Tech is a legitimate top 25 team. Got BYU after that. BYU is the literal definition of a crapshoot to me. The average age of the player on BYU is about 23 because they do the 2-year missionary deal when they get there. So to mature, they always have a huge offensive line. And in any given year, if they have a playmaker or two, they can win 8, 9, 10 games. Last year, they were 9-0, lost their last 3 games or something. Like it was a weird season for BYU, sort of played their way out of the playoff picture in the last month of the season. And you never really know what you're going to get with them. We may look up at the end of the year and they're 7-5. We may look up at the end of the year and they're 11-1 and headed to the Big 12 title game. Iowa State, same thing. Great quarterback, great coaching staff. They're in the Big 12. Someone has to win the Big 12. It could be Iowa State. It's so hard to handicap the Big 12. I can't be the only one that thinks that. If you had to name the top 5 teams in the Big 12 in order, could you do it? I mean, I'm sure you could, but like, how confident would you be in that order? It's extremely hard to handicap the Big 12. I've got Texas A&M up next. I don't really understand why nobody's talking more about Texas A&M. They weren't a great team last year, I'll be the first to admit, but it was, first year for Mike Elko. And they had a chance to make the SEC championship game in the last game of the regular season. I don't know how many people remember this. It was a boring game, but the Texas A&M game. We've been waiting 20 years or 15 years, whatever it is, to see this game. It got hyped up beyond belief all year long. And then the week leading up to the game was, oh my God, the winner of this game is in the SEC championship game. And then the game was such a snooze fest. It was just a boring game that it just kind of got swept under the rug and forgot about. But Texas A&M was 1 win away from making the SEC championship game last year in Mike Elko's first year there. And we all remember what he did at Duke. I mean, he didn't win anything, but it's Duke. He had Duke competing to beat one of the best Florida State teams we've seen in a long time. I mean, He's a good coach, and they had a good year. Was it great? No, it's a Texas 8-4, like they always are. But they're not that far away, I don't think, from being able to compete for a playoff spot. So I've got them in my top 25, followed up by SMU. And I'm going to admit here with SMU, this is just a respect placement for SMU. I have a lot of respect for what SMU was able to do last year. A group of 5 team, first year in the Power 4, playing for 0 TV revenue in a conference where multiple teams are suing their own conference because they don't think they make enough TV money, right, Clemson, right, Florida State? All SMU did was say, we don't want no money. Just give us a chance to beat you. And they came into the ACC, and that's what they did. They beat the soul out of Florida State, and they damn near beat Clemson in the ACC championship game. They did come up a little bit short, but they made the playoffs in their first year as a Power 4 team. Now, like Indiana last year, I have a hard time buying in on a permanent basis to teams that have done it once. I need to see it more than one time. Look at everybody's, not just mine, but look at everybody's top 5, okay? These teams are in the top 5 or top 10 almost every single year. You don't even have to think about it. They've earned that through what they've done on the field over an extended period of time, whether you're talking about 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is. It's harder for me to buy in with an Indiana, an SMU, a team that sort of has one pop year, and a lot of times we then see them disappear. TCU a few years ago makes the national title game. The following year, they couldn't win a game, right? I don't know which way SMU is going to go. Maybe they're ascending. Maybe they'll have another great year and compete to win the ACC. Maybe they go 6-6 and we don't even talk about them after October. I don't know, but I've got them in my post-spring top 25 here. Tennessee, I had to move way down. This has nothing to do with hate for Tennessee or anything else. If any team in the country loses their returning starting quarterback on the last day of spring practice, there's no way to spin that as a positive. There's just not. On top of the fact that they lost their best offensive player from last year, running back Dylan Sampson, to the NFL draft. They lost their best defensive player from last year, James Pierce, to the NFL draft. They lost every wide receiver they had last year. So they got all new wide receivers. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. It's either going to be a group of 5 quarterback in Joey Aguilar, who has led American interceptions over the last 2 years, or it's going to be an underclassman, highly rated underclassman, with almost 0 college experience at all. It's a net negative in terms of what it means on the field for Tennessee this season that they lost Nico. Now, we all applaud Tennessee for how they handled it and the positive impact it may have on college football as a whole down the road, not allowing a player to hold you hostage like that. We all applaud that. But you're going to have to pay a price for that this season, in my opinion. You're not a better team right now than you were the day before Nico quit. You're just not. You're a worse team. And I had serious questions about Tennessee's ability to repeat what they did last year, even when I thought Nico was coming back to be the QB. 10-2 last year in a playoff berth. I think that's a little bit too lofty of an expectation for Tennessee this season. Now, I don't think Josh Heupel is Butch Jones or Jeremy Pruitt. I don't think we're about to see a scenario where Tennessee goes back to winning 5 games a year. I don't think that. I think Tennessee will win 8, maybe even 9 games if things go their way. They host Georgia early in the season. That's a huge game for both teams. That'll be Georgia's first road game, which means it'll be Gunnar Stockton's first road game at quarterback for Georgia. It'll be Tennessee's first big game of the year. They play Syracuse early on, but they should be able to handle that. But they have to go to Alabama. They have to go to Florida. Josh Heupel has really struggled in road games. It seems like an uphill climb right now for Tennessee to get to the 10-win mark, which is what they would need to do to match last season. So I still think they're a top 25 team. I don't think Tennessee is a program we should write off, but I have a hard time right now considering Tennessee as a potential top 12 or playoff type of team. I've been wrong before. I've got Ole Miss right after that. Now, they're a portal team, and they signed a bunch of kids in the portal again, and a bunch of them are highly rated and really good, but they lose Jackson Dart. And eventually, your hit rate in the portal, you can't sustain it. I like Lane Kiffin. Like Tennessee, I don't think Ole Miss is going back to winning 5 games a year. But I don't think Ole Miss is going to be quite as good this season as they were last year. I do not think they will be in contention for a playoff spot at the end of the year like they were last year, although I do still think they'll be a pretty tough out for anybody in the SEC. I've got them ranked at 22. Arizona State at 23, a playoff team last year. Yeah, the coaching staff is back, and I love Dillingham. Sam Levitt is back at quarterback. But they lose Scatterbo, and they just don't recruit like other teams in the top 5 and 10, to where when they lose a player of that caliber, you can kind of just assume they'll be able to replace him. You cannot assume that with Arizona State. I like Kenny Dillingham and Levitt too much to expect Arizona State to just fall off the map. And again, because it's the Big 12, look, they could win the Big 12 again. I'm not writing them off. But as far as why I have them ranked where I do compared to some of the other teams, those are the reasons. Those are the reasons why. Louisville. Apologies to whatever Louisville fans are out there. Why do we keep doing this to Louisville? And by we, I mean me. Louisville is winning 8-9 games in their sleep. They played for the ACC championship a couple of years ago. They beat Clemson last year. They beat Clemson last year. Brom, the coach there, is getting the absolute most out of what he's got available to work with at Louisville. Is it going to surprise me at all if I look up in November and Louisville is in a spot to potentially make the ACC title game? No, not at all. But for whatever reason, I have a hard time ranking Louisville anywhere higher than 20. I don't know what it is. I'm guilty as charged. I don't know what it is. I've got them at 24. And then TCU, I think a lot like Texas Tech, is a team that no one's thinking about or talking about that I think is poised to have a breakout year. Now, does that mean win the Big 12 and make the playoffs? Probably not. And, most likely you're only going to get one Big 12 team in, maybe 2. But I think TCU is set to surprise some people this year. Really like their quarterback. I like their coaching staff too. There you go. Pointless, ridiculous, post-spring top 25. Feel free to tell me down below where I'm wrong and how stupid I am. Have a good morning.